Andrea Johnson, welcome to the Human to Human podcast. I'm so grateful to have you here today.
Amazing. Super excited for a call and I'm looking forward to seeing where our conversation goes.
I'm stoked to talk to you because when I stumbled upon your profile on LinkedIn, and by the way, I think it's so easy to connect with people today. You just have to send them a message on LinkedIn or Instagram or wherever. It's so easy to connect with people. But the
Mhm.
first thing that really caught me about just your vibe online and your presence was putting the human back into human resources. So as soon as I saw that, I was like, okay, I got to connect with this woman because clearly she's very passionate about similar topics to that of me. So I can't wait to dive into all things employee culture, employee experiences. But before we do that, tell me a little bit about your last decade, because I know you've been in human resources for quite a long time. What drew you to that field of work, and what's kept you there?
My last decade. So, how much time do you have
We've got
to
time.
really? I'll give you a summary. So, my last decade's been interesting. Human resources wasn't actually something that I kind of knew existed. I had dabbled in it. So, when you look at like hindsight, looking back, I see that, yeah, I did some like payroll things when I was like in university working for a company. And I worked with entrepreneurs for pretty much a long time. So I've always been doing bits of HR, but I didn't really delve into HR until about 6, 7 years ago. And I just happened to be working for this amazing company. I happened to be part of the HR team doing more administration. And my director then actually kind of said, hey, I think you would be great in HR. What do you think about it? So it was really having someone there seeing me and seeing that I could be a great fit. And I've never looked back since. It's been an amazing, amazing journey. Um, and I love it. I love human resources and the impact and the potential it has to really help companies to get to where they want to go. Because I think it's something that people leave on the table quite often because they see HR as like, yeah, just payroll. But when you have a company that involves people, not AI, but actual people, people actually are not leaving their humanness at the door when they enter your organization. They're bringing their humanness, they're bringing their desires, their motivations, their feelings into the company. So when you recognize that, there's an entire world that's open to you.
What do you think is one of the most common misconceptions people have about the field of HR and just the role of HR? Because I know that it is like such a vital role in any organization. And I
Yeah.
also know that some people treat it as like, yeah, we don't really need that yet. And it's very reactive. So what would you say are some
Mm-hmm.
of the most like either frustrating things you hear or the biggest misconceptions?
Mm. So I think, yeah, definitely there is a very big misunderstanding about what human resources is. Um, I think it may come from HR being highly administrative in the past.
Mm.
Um, in the past, where it was like highly industrial, where employees were just like cogs in the machine, clock in, clock out. Um, this is not a place where you're socializing. We don't really want to get to know you. It was a different HR had a different need. Just really, it was payroll, right? Hire, let go, pay. But as we've evolved and time has evolved, it's changed. But I think the perception of HR hasn't changed. So I think that's one thing. And then you also touched on something interesting as well, because I think that as soon as you start hiring people, you're in the business of human resources. Whether you're the CEO doing it or whether you are the receptionist doing it or whomever you may be, you're doing human resources, but you're doing it by default. And you're not being proactive with it. You're being very, very reactive, as you said. So I usually say, like, once you start hiring employees, like, invest in your human resources. It doesn't mean you have to hire like a human resources person right off the bat, but maybe you hire a consultant. Maybe you delve into what the legislator requires for you to do as a company so that you're not putting yourselves in this unnecessary risk because the information is also out there. So those would be the two things, like recognize the power of HR and also invest in HR early in the way that that works for you. But there's a lot of amazing consultants out there, right? So there's no excuse, I think, for a company not to do that. And I think that when you don't invest in HR, then you kind of set yourself up for some possible risks, and also possibly losing out on potential of your employees.
I love that, the potential of your employees, because I think if people join an organization, they don't want to get onboarded, have an amazing couple of months. Like, they don't want to look for another job, right? If they're being onboarded, like they're hoping that they're going to be building a long-term relationship with this employer. There's a succession plan in place. They hopefully they see a future with their company before they accept the offer. In some of my conversations, I've noticed that the other view of human resources is that, well, it's just a cost, right? It's not like, how is it going to bring in revenue? How is it going to help our bottom line? How is it going to affect the income for the year? And I think there's a lot of opportunity cost and employee costs from a disengagement standpoint that a lot of founders don't take into account. But have you ever heard that? Like, have you ever heard people talk about human resources as a cost versus a investment?
Of course. And I think the reason why is when you look at other functions within a company, it's very clear to see the dollars that are coming in. So for example, sales, it's very clear, right? When you're looking at professional services, you're seeing the money coming in as well. So it's very clear. With human resources, you have to dig a bit further because it's more, it's not as visible. It's a bit more vague. But if you think about it, if you're a company where you have people working for you, right? And if those people are not within the walls of your company, or whether they're virtual walls or physical walls, if they're not there, kind of investing their time and energy into building your company as opposed to being elsewhere or having their own company, then there's value there, right? If with their absence, your business is not going to function, there's value there. Maybe you have to look at the breadcrumbs to understand the value and see where the dollars come in. But just because it's not entirely clear doesn't mean it's not there. Just takes a bit more work to find it.
I was just making a note to ask you, because I think this is really important. What are some of the key metrics that you think every company needs to track from a human resources standpoint? I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear from just the vast experiences that you bring to the table. Are there a couple like go-to metrics that you think a company of 10 or a company of 50 should be monitoring on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis?
So there are some metrics that you should monitor, right? But I always want to say that having metrics isn't everything, because you also have to be in touch with your employee base. Because if you were to just have numbers and just use that as everything, like everything's based off of only numbers, you're also missing out some things because not everything can be measured, right? So looking at, for example, one thing that we always look at is your attrition rate. Like people kind of like saying yes to your company and signing on, and then very quickly exiting, or are they staying in for the long term and really growing with your company? If it takes about 6 months for someone to be onboarded and then to be kind of like producing at a high level, but they're leaving in 6 months, like what's happening? Is it happening with the same team? Is it an opportunity that you're missing, as in you're not training, onboarding them correctly? Is it perhaps the manager perhaps needs to be trained and upskilled a bit more? Like what's happening, right? So attrition is really important, because they said yes to your company. So why are they now saying no? So you need to ask. And some companies would just say, oh, well, I guess they're just not a good fit. And they don't ask. When that employee is leaving, you need to ask them why they're leaving, right? But you also need to have different checkpoints throughout your employee life cycle with the company. But attrition, looking at changes in productivity would be something that you can keep an eye on as well. If people are even applying to your company, that's something to look at. If they are accepting your offer once you've put it out there, that's important to look at. Doing surveys throughout the year to get a pulse on the employees to see Would they recommend your company to their friends and family? Are people even making referrals to your company? Like, those are things to look at. There's so much to look at, and it's definitely not it's not easy, and that's why some people won't do it. But it's because it's a bit more challenging doesn't mean that there isn't like a lot of value to be had, and it doesn't mean that it's not worth it, because I think it definitely is.
It always frustrates me when people just say, well, they must not be a good fit. And they look
Yeah.
at external blame as the potential cause or the issue. I actually have a friend, I won't say her name, but I've got a friend who has continuously onboarded, and I'm going to say continuously has onboarded for the same position. And the average new hire lasts for less than 4 weeks. And that's like, yeah, less than 4 weeks. And I've asked her a bunch of times. Sorry, my dog is going to be barking in a second, but I've asked her a bunch of times, hey, like, what's happening? It's been 4 weeks for employee A, 4 weeks for employee B, 4 weeks for employee C. And the continuous feedback I'm hearing is, well, they just might not be a good fit. What would you say to that?
Ooh. I would have a lot of questions to begin with, because it's an interesting situation. Like, that's not normal. And like, I personally haven't seen that happen. And you don't hear about that a lot. So it's kind of a really interesting puzzle to solve. I would say there's always, okay, so there are relationships, right? Everything is a relationship. You have two people, it's a relationship. You have yourself and your puppy, it's a relationship, right? So even with ourselves, we have a relationship with ourselves. So in that scenario, you're looking at a new employee and you're looking at a company. So it's not always going to be on one side. It's a shared responsibility and shared accountability. So I would say perhaps it's not the right fit, right? But why? Why is it not the right fit? Are you perhaps not clear on who you're hiring and hiring people who are not the right fit? Are you are you saying that you are a company that you're not? And then people join and they realize the truth of the situation and then they exit? Are they feeling as though they will not be successful because maybe the onboarding isn't clear or supportive, and they're not getting the tools that they would need to be successful in that company? Because from the moment someone enters your door, they're evaluating, right? Is everything that I was led to believe is true for this company actually true? Do I see this company as a place I can be at? Will I grow and enjoy my time here? So if any of the answers to that is no, they're going to want to leave. And when an employee's joined your company, they've just finished interviewing with other companies. So chances are other companies are also reaching out to them while they're being onboarded with you. You want it to be a situation where they love your company so much and everything's like, yes, this is what I thought it was going to be. These people are fantastic. The work is going to be so interesting. I'm going to be trained and set up for success, so that they're getting yeses to those questions, so that when they get those phone calls from people that they applied to in the past, they say, thank you, but no thank you. I'm really happy where I'm at. So if you're in a situation where it's happened 2 times, 3 times, where people are leaving within 4 weeks, you need to kind of pause what you're doing, look at your job description, look at your onboarding, look at your training, look at the management of that team, look at the employees in that team, reach out to those people and say, hey, just wanted to understand what's happening. This is the scenario we're in. This has happened a few times. Would love it if we can have a candid, off the record conversation so I can really understand what happened, where we went wrong, and to make sure that we can fix that, because we're of course all growing, right? So how can we fix this? How can you help us fix this so we can make sure that we grow as a company and we are able to prevent this from happening in the future? Because you have people leaving jobs to join your company and then they're leaving your company in 4 weeks. So I think it's something to really take a pause and delve into before moving forward and continuing doing the same thing and expecting that there'll be a different outcome.
I love that. I'm going to send her this clip, just this clip. I'm going to send her like the last 6 minutes. So Andrea, I wanted to ask you, and I had a different question actually pop up. So I was going to ask you, how have you seen the world of HR change in the last 12 months? I was going to ask you that. But what I'm more curious about is, where do you see the world of HR going in the next 12 months instead? So given that we've all been working from home for almost a year now, and it doesn't look like that's changing, at least not for you or I, because we had a quick offline conversation. But where do you see the world of HR change, I guess, going in the next 12 months?
Good
And I think
question.
the angle I'm most interested in is like around employee experiences and how
Okay.
teams are going to be able to juggle their employees remotely. What should they be putting in place from a culture standpoint? I love that you said surveys earlier. Like, what types of activities and what do you see as just the future of like hybrid and remote teams? I know that's like a big question, but I'm super
It is a
fascinated.
big
I'm
question.
super fascinated to hear from you, because you've been working from home for about a year or just over. And I think that's not changing for you anytime soon. So I'm wondering tell me a little bit about your experience and what's happened and where you think it's headed.
Hmm. Where is HR headed in the next 12 months? Um, I think that, well, I'll touch a bit on the past year just to answer that question as well. So I think what I've seen in the HR space in the past year is that previous to this, there was a question mark quite often about the value of HR, right? Some companies even think to themselves, like, do we even need our HR team? Maybe we should just let them go, right? But I think the past year has really kind of shown the value that we as HR practitioners are bringing to the company, right? We're standing in between the employees and the ownership, the executive team, whomever that may be. And we are maneuvering between those two different groups and trying to help them both meet their needs and get to their outcomes with the same programs and policies, etc. So that's where we're standing. So now, whenever there's a big shift in a company, it's always like HR needs to kind of like put on their their, I don't want to say armor, but more like, their whatever it is they wear when they're going in to like get that work done. So in the past year, I saw HR really having to like to jump in and swim, right? To help keep companies moving and to help keep employees engaged. And I think as far as what I see in the next 12 months, I see people fine tuning those different things. So there's been a lot of changes within companies during this time. And I think we've all been able to see like what we've been doing, what's working, what's not working. And hopefully learning more about what can we do in addition to that, especially now that we're looking at this not being a 2 week scenario, but actually being a almost probably 2 year scenario, right? So that's what I see. I see HR really being more and more involved and being more involved, being welcomed to the table more often when it comes to how can we as a company succeed in this environment? Because every company is existing in an environment of some kind, right? With many different factors. And when those things start changing, you need to be able to navigate through it with as much grace as you can, right? And I think the more that you're working as a team, your whole company, as opposed to different sections, the more you're working as a team, sharing
You nailed it.
information, having conversations, kind of getting rid of that hierarchy. Like you want to have a company where no matter, ideally, see, I tend to work for companies in tech, and I tend to work for Canadian companies, right? And there's a very specific reason for that, because once I got a taste of it, I loved it. But also I recognize that those companies tend to have a culture or an environment where an employee, no matter the level of the employee, whether they've been there for a week or whatever it may be, or 10 years or 20 years, can walk into an executive's office and have a conversation, can share their opinions, can share their ideas. And I think that's what's really needed right now. Just everyone actually coming together and working very closely to as a group, as a team, navigate the scenario together. That's where the strength comes in, right?
Have you seen
I
that shift at all with a virtual world? Like,
mm,
because I do agree. I think the reason I also love startups, and typically my clients are between 10 and 50 employees. They're in tech. They're
yeah.
virtually remote anyways. And now COVID just made that more of a thing. Like now they're just all virtual anyways. And what I loved about working in tech previously was that culture of, hey, yeah, you can walk into the CEO's office and he knows you by name, or he or she knows you by name, and you feel like, hey, this is not that hierarchical relationship that I'm used to in like corporate.
Yeah.
But in a virtual world, have you seen any of that change? Maybe even for your own team? Like, is that open door policy still existing virtually?
We've always had that in my company.
Mm.
Again, like I typically wouldn't work at a company that does not have that.
That's
I'm
good
being
to know.
honest, like I'm very clear about who I am. I'm
Mm.
very clear about the kind of companies that I enjoy working for and I thrive in, right? I know the companies as well where I will not enjoy working for
Mm.
typically. So I tend to steer in a very specific direction,
Got it.
let's say. As far as have I seen, I think your question was, have I seen that change?
Virtually, yeah.
Virtually. I've seen, yes, I've seen a change when I look at the landscape, right? Like externally, I've seen internally, yes, but we were always like a really strong team to begin with. And I think that that is what actually helped us to have a very easy transition to working remotely. And funny enough, in February, so I joined the company in January. My very first policy was standardizing a work from home policy in
Oh,
February.
wow. Talk about timing.
And then in March, we were working remotely full time, right?
Wow.
So that was pretty interesting. But the company had a level of trust and a level of flexibility and a level of wanting to do the best for the employees, and they listened to the employees, right? And that's why we created that policy to begin with in February. So has it changed? Yes, I think so. I think companies have had, in some ways, companies have had to been forced to be a bit more open, a bit more transparent, to remove blockages to communication in some ways. But I think also in some ways, depending on the company, perhaps not, right? Because if there isn't a level of trust, maybe you're looking at different ways that you can monitor your employees because you don't trust them. In different ways, although they're working remotely, right? So you're seeing a lot of kind of like this software coming out where you can monitor the movement and the keystrokes on, right? And things like that, like, having a company, for example, that can definitely work remotely but chooses not to, or can definitely have like, one day work from home but chose not to. I found it was usually based on a level of trust because you can do it, so why are you not doing it? So even in this scenario, that kind of company may still implement ways to keep tabs on their employees. But I think that if you are not keeping tabs on if you find that there's a need to keep tabs on your employees, maybe you're hiring the wrong people, or maybe you need to perhaps look at why.
Yeah, I think that's a much deeper rooted issue there for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, listen, given that we're now talking a little bit about virtual and the virtual world, talk to me a little bit about employee experience, because I know you're a fan of how important employee experience is for the success of any company. I'd love to hear from you in terms of, have you seen any creative ideas to keep employees engaged virtually? Any sort of, I don't know, I call them happy hours. Like, I guess number one, how has your team been able to maintain that camaraderie virtually from an experience standpoint? And number two, is there something that you're really looking forward to doing for your team in the next 12 months?
So, I mean, okay, so definitely, so for us as a company, transitioning from like, we all have a laptop. So taking that home and working from home, being connected to the service, etc., that was super easy for us, right? Because we were ready for that. I guess the challenge, and challenge is a very strong word, but the interesting puzzle to be solved during that time for us was, how do we take all the opportunities for connection that we had in the office? How do we take all the opportunities for interaction? How do we communicate differently being remote, right? So there were things that we would do. We would have like our company meetings. We had like usually typically very big Christmas parties where spouses were allowed to come as well. And we would get to know each other's spouses, and, so we weren't able to do that last year, but we found ways around it. And so, yeah, that was the biggest challenge. Like, how do we keep communication going to the level that we wanted and we had before, or more? How do we keep opportunities for engagement going to the level that we had before or more? And that was it. So yeah, so I think, and if you look at the space, you also see that, people were doing a lot of happy hours, as you mentioned. I think December was a very interesting time, because in October, November, it became very clear that Christmas parties were not going to be happening. So companies had to find different ways of creating that experience for their employees, right? Without having to bring them in a space together. So there, I mean, for us as a company, so in the past we had thought about forming a social committee, but we hadn't actually done it. We just kind of like had an ad hoc social committee. I was the center of that because I love planning events as well. And I would kind of bring in help as I needed it. But I'm just like, nope, we need an actual like legit social committee. So we formed that. We got ideas from the team. So we tend to typically ask, like, what do you need? What do you want? Right? Because I mean, why should I stand here on my island and make assumptions about what somebody wants when they're just over there and I can ask? Right? So we would ask those questions, and
That was a mic drop moment.
Was it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but the funny thing about when you drop a mic is you gotta pick it back up.
I know.
Right?
Yeah, I totally hear you on the ask. Just ask.
Just ask. Always ask. You may get a no, but you may get a yes. You may get the same answer that you were expecting, or you may get something different. It takes a few seconds. Just ask. So we formed the committee. We found ways of having like weekly meetings. So we do a weekly touch point, which is a mix of like company news and just like interesting shares, etc. We had like a weekly session that people can attend if they wanted to or not, which was games. We took our yoga sessions from the physical space, and we found a way to make them virtual. For the holidays, instead of having a really big company event, we did something where we mailed like a customized, really fun package out to everybody. Cool. And we also had an event. Well, we also shared, like, said, order yourself lunch, here's a treat. And then we also had an event after that with an activity, with some social time, with a really amazing game that was really fun. And so we had 5 people. Like, our company is like 21 people. Our social team is 5 people, right? So we had 5 people putting together this experience. So it took a lot of work, yes. But also what we recognize is that people want to be engaged. They want to create these events. It's a fun thing to do at work. So why not allow them to assist with it? So we had a great team, did a really great series of events. And yeah, so that was great.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of employee experiences, huge fan of asking questions. The amount of companies that I've talked to, just specifically in 2020, that said to me, hey, dude, we operate like siloed islands where everyone's just busy doing their own thing. They're worried about their own KPIs, their own metrics. Sales doesn't talk to development doesn't talk to customer success doesn't talk to IT doesn't. And I'm like, whoa, you guys have like this. I'm referring to a company specifically. I'm like, you guys have 15 employees. How is that possible? And then I've worked with even a smaller company with 7 employees. And this company had 3 silos in a 7-person company. So like there's always room for communication. There's always room for connecting your teammates. And like, nobody wants to, like, you spend just as much time at work as you do at home. Now it's kind of like
More.
blended. Yeah, more now.
You spend more.
You
Yeah.
spend more, especially now. I would say I think Forbes did a study saying, quote, the average person works an extra like 38 to 48 minutes a day. For me, I think it's like I work an extra 3 hours a day easily than I used to pre-pandemic. But yeah, I'm a big fan of just asking questions. And I do ask a lot of companies, when was the last time you guys had some sort of an engagement survey or team survey? And I hear one of two things. I hear number one, never. And I hear number two, oh yeah, we did that last year. Where did that end up again? And like, they just don't do anything with the results. And I think that's equally as bad. If you issue the survey and then you just sit on the results, it's not really doing anything either.
I think it's actually worse.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
If you do the survey, because you
It is
raise the
worse.
hope that something's going to change and people take the time to share their feelings, opinions, knowing that that this is going to go somewhere, right? So the hope is there. So you raise their hopes and then you just drop it, but it goes to a lower level, in my opinion. So for the companies that have never done it, they're probably in a better position because there's less resentment that people are probably feeling. But I think employee experience is super interesting. I think, back in the day, I did spend some time like in retail and hospitality. So customer experience was always super important. And in human resources, I always find it interesting that like, why don't we in a company, not only human resources, but it's so clear to me, like apply the same way that you manage customer experience to employees. Your employees are your clients. You're paying them to do a job, but for me, my employees are my clients. So I need to connect with them. I need to serve them. I need to also check in with them and see how they're doing. Would they offer my product, my company, to other people that they care and love, or not? If the answer is no, then how can I make it? How can I make adjustments so that they do?
You just nailed something really important. And it's that employee experience has a direct correlation to customer experience.
That's another thing as well. Absolutely.
Right?
It takes one employee.
It takes one employee. And I remember at one of my previous 9-to-5s, like I loved going in every day and I felt appreciated and I could talk to the CEO and I played ping pong every now and then on my break. And like, it was a lot of fun, but that directly correlated to my sales success at that company. Because I truly believed in not only what I was selling, but who I was selling for and the company. And it was so important to me. And I don't think there's a lot of emphasis put on the correlation between a customer's experience with your team based on that employee's engagement levels. I think they're completely
directly connected. Absolutely. Because, if you kind of go back to it, like when you have an employee interacting with a client, they're communicating, right? And when you have communication, a very high percentage of that, like 90% or 90 something percent, the exact number isn't coming to me right now, but most of it is nonverbal, right? A tiny percent of it is actually verbal.
Correct.
So if you're looking at employee experience, like how that employee is feeling, right? People will always remember how you make them feel, always, right? They'll always have that energy when they think about you as a company. So if you look at, kind of focusing on employee experience, taking care of your employees, maybe you can't say yes to everything they ask for, but I think also just being heard and knowing that you were listened to and then it was considered and then it was a no, it's still also a value, right? So when you have that employee who is engaged, who's having a great experience with their company, when they think of your company, they smile, they talk about your company with their friends and their family, especially when they're complaining about their jobs, right? Like, oh, my company's great, like that comes through in a conversation, that comes through in the nonverbal communication that is happening in every customer interaction. It takes one employee to either like delight a client, or it takes one employee to make a client leave and then share that information with others, right? You have people, like the people who are interacting with your clients every day, your employees, you need to take care of them. I always say, take care of your 20 employees or your 50 employees, and they will take care of your thousands of clients. They'll be like your gladiators. Like that's what you want to do.
Mic drop.
Make them your ambassadors. make them your ambassadors, make them your gladiators, and they will take care of the thousands. Focus on like that small group, you know, and
Mhm.
you're set.
Yeah, I super well said. I think a lot of companies, a lot of startups, especially, they're so concerned about customer acquisition
Mm,
and customer retention. And I think if they placed equal emphasis on employee satisfaction and employee retention and employee
mm-hmm.
well-being,
Yeah.
again, like there's no secret that employee happiness is directly correlated to profitability. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't, I can send you a bunch of KPMG reports and Deloitte reports that will tell you that in much greater detail than I can. But yeah, it's absolutely correlated. So before we wrap, I want to take
Mm-hmm.
it one different direction. So
Yes.
how can entrepreneurs build a focus around culture as they grow their companies? It looks like your current company has about 21 employees. I personally love working with startups between 10 and 50, 10 and 100. It's my jam. I love it. It's just something really fun and exciting about it.
Yeah.
But for any entrepreneur listening to this who's like, okay, Andrea nailed a couple mic drop moments here. I need to start focusing on culture.
Yeah.
What do I do first?
Ooh, okay. So I would say, first of all, know the culture exists, you know, whether you are intentionally kind of crafting it or whether you're just letting it create itself, it's there. Ideally, you don't want to have your culture being created by default, right? Ideally, you want to have um, almost like, you know, baking. You want to be crafting, creating it because it's going to be there, but create it in the way that it serves you, right? And your employees and adds value. So that also when it's something's going wrong, you also can feel it that something's going wrong, and then you can rectify it. I always say to entrepreneurs, especially because entrepreneurs are in a space where it's like you're seeing all of these very interesting things all these companies are doing, and they're spending all this money, and you're like, but I'm just an entrepreneur. I only have like 4 employees. I don't have that much of a budget. Like, what can I do, right? But there's a lot that you can do. You have to like step back and look at what you offer, what those companies perhaps cannot offer, right? Not everything is going to cost money. A lot of it, as I said before, people will always remember the way that you make them feel. So as an entrepreneur, like I would say, know who you are, you know what you stand for, be very clear on the kinds of employees that work for you, right? And take your time and hire the right people. If it takes a month, if it takes longer, take the time to hire right, because again, it takes that one employee to make a difference, either an amazing difference or not so great difference in your company. I would also say, um, be aware of what's happening around you, and maybe like those companies that are spending the big dollars, they've probably been around for 10 years. You've been around for 2 years, you'll get
Mm-hmm.
there, but be focused on where you are right now. Take care of your employees. Things, for example, that entrepreneurs or smaller companies tend to have or can have would be, understand what motivates your employees. Are they motivated by money? If so, maybe they're not the right employee for you. Are they motivated by making an impact? Are they motivated by having a great environment and adding to that environment? Are they motivated in growing and they want to have a close relationship with you so that they can also kind of learn from you as an unofficial mentor of sorts? Are you able to offer flexibility to your employees? Do you have a really amazing product that they're proud to say that they work for you and your product?
Mm-hmm.
Having like a smaller hierarchy, you know? So yeah, step back and understand who you are, what you offer. Be very upfront about what you're offering and who you are, because you don't want to have a situation where you're promising things and pretending to be something that you're not. And then people come into your space and realize, oh, that's not true. So you've
Mm-hmm.
essentially broken that emotional contract, and then they leave. So invest in culture right away. So those are the main things. And of course, invest in HR. Be very clear on what you're doing. Have someone that's there to help you as an entrepreneur, because you have a lot on your plate, in keeping their fingers on the pulse of the company as well,
Mm-hmm.
and helping you to create the kind of company that you dream of,
Mm.
and that you're proud of owning as well?
I can't wait to send this to all the companies. So, Andrea, I've got
Yeah.
3 final questions that I always ask all my guests. Before I
Okay.
do that, where can people best find you online if they wanted to get in touch?
In touch, I would say LinkedIn. I
LinkedIn?
mean, it's where I'm most active.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, my first question is, what are you most excited about in the next 60 days?
The next 60 days, that's very specific. In the next 60 days, I am, okay, so because it's the start of a new year, I am doing quite a bit in the sense of setting us up for success for this year and planning for this year as far as like what will HR bring to the table for the company. So I'm excited about rolling out some interesting programs and such. And yeah, I would say most excited about planning for 2021 with my department as well as the rest of the team. Having that plan in place, and then also kind of seeing it evolve as time goes on throughout the year.
Cool. Sounds very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
My next question is, and I don't know if you're a book reader or not. I read a ton of books, but
I have a shell.
is there a book or a couple books that you think every entrepreneur or every human resources individual or just any person should read?
Okay, so I would probably, okay. So I think that, like for me, foundation is something that's very important. The foundation of our lives, the foundation of who we are, etc. So I would recommend books probably based on that as opposed to something specific as HR or entrepreneurship.
Mm.
And I would say as far as the books that have had the most impact on me and maybe the ones I give out the most would be what I would probably recommend.
Love that.
So the book that I give out the most, because I tend to also, I love books. I tend to buy the physical books. I'm thinking about maybe getting a Kindle, but I'm not sure. And I tend to write a lot as I'm going, make notes, etc. So the
Me
books
too.
that I give would be the Four Agreements. That's
My
a very
girlfriend's
important
favorite book.
Oh,
yeah.
Your girlfriend's a very smart woman. That book is great because I think the Four Agreements themselves, like if we were all following 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4 of them, the world would be an entirely different space. Companies would be entirely different. One of them is to speak with integrity. How often do people do that, right? Another is not make assumptions. So, for example, ask questions. Very important. Don't take anything personally because really it's not personal also. So I think those agreements are amazing. A second book I tend to love is The Success Principles. It's co-written by Jack Canfield. He was one of the authors of Chicken Soup for the Soul. That book is amazing. The very first 2 lessons you can actually just download from their website because they offer them freely. But the book itself is very valuable. First lesson is 100% responsibility, which I think, again, if someone just kind of really takes that lesson in and lives it, life-changing. Third book, As a Man Thinketh.
Oh, yeah, James Allen.
Yeah. Amazing book as well. Kind of goes hand in hand with like responsibility, but recognizing that the world isn't happening to you, right? Like you have control. We always have choices. The choices may not be ideal. Maybe both choices suck, but you still have a choice between which sucky choice you go with.
Absolutely.
Right? But hopefully they both don't suck. Hopefully one is much better than the other. But we always have choices, and we have power. And I think we need to kind of like take that in a bit more, as opposed to just letting things happen to us by default as well.
So it was The Success Principles, The Four Agreements, and As a Man Thinketh. Great recommendations.
Yes.
My last question.
Oh.
My last question. It's my favorite question. I've got a ton of favorite questions, but this is probably one of my favorite questions.
Okay, throw it at me.
So tomorrow morning, everyone wakes up. Every city, every country, India, Spain, Canada, US, everyone wakes up tomorrow morning and they open up their bedroom blinds and they're all looking at a billboard. They're all
Uh-huh.
looking at the exact same billboard, except tomorrow morning, Andrea controls the message of what's
Oh,
written on
okay.
that billboard. So, what would you write tomorrow morning for the entire world to see?
Ooh, what would I write? Okay. Okay. I would write you.
I know it's a doozy.
Yeah, because it's like that one sentence that everyone's seeing. So no pressure at all, right?
I
But
know.
yes, I would say, okay, I would say you are more amazing than you believe. And the reason I would say that is because um, in conversations I have, in what I do, I see that a lot of the times there's a there's a sense of kind of like not being great, lacking confidence, lacking esteem, lacking a sense of being worth anything that people tend to walk around with. And when you're walking around with that, every interaction you're having, it's influencing every interaction you have, um, and therefore your outcomes.
Mm.
So if we can kind of like step back and change where the very beginning, change where people are starting off from and interacting from, I think the outcomes can be very different as well. And if I'm having an interaction with you and I feel very much taken care of, I'm then able to give to you as well, right? Then able to share with you as opposed to hoarding and trying to only keep everything for myself. So as I said before, like foundation, I think for me is very important. The start of everything is very important because it's if we can get back to there, I think we can change a lot. Um, I think if we maneuver throughout throughout our lives, knowing ourselves truly and what we offer, I think that what we do and how we do it would be very different. So that would be it.
No pressure. You are, you are more amazing than you believe.
Yeah.
Andrea, thank you so much for another mic drop to end today's episode. I just wanted to say, really appreciate your time here today. Really appreciate your openness and your honesty and your full transparency. You're clearly very passionate about what you do. And it's no surprising that people probably gravitate towards you. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. And I wanted to say thank you to you for what you do. I do love the company name Just Be, for example. Again, really kind of drew me in. Your focus on relationships and what you do to help people develop better relationships and stronger relationships. Amazing. Also made me gravitate towards you. So thank you for this opportunity and this lovely conversation. And have yourself a lovely, lovely day.